Lads and ladies, it looks like we're getting served a God Valley 2.0 here in Elbaph by Oda because everything is falling into place for yet another all-out war between every major faction in the One Piece world. We've got the Holy Knights with their twisted game of kidnapping the giant children of Elbaph, I guess. The Straw Hats are basically the Raja pirates at this point. There are potentially many legendary treasures to be won in Elbaph, and I have even some predictions for who will take the role of the Rocks pirates and the Marines as well. And if this epic battle actually happens, it will most likely kick off the greatest revolution in One Piece history. Do you see what I'm getting at here? Yeah, it's kind of crazy, so let's discuss how the original God Valley actually parallels the current events here in Elbaph, and what crazy twists I think Oda might add here to completely change the outcome this time around. Anyone else voting to completely wipe out the Holy Knights? Now, with the latest chapter and after analyzing the events and setup of Elbaph, these pieces have all been building towards a world-changing brawl, but the final piece of evidence to really says that this is going to be a repeat of God Valley came at the end of chapter 1140. Right here, as Shamrock is leaving the island, you can see that he tells his subordinates to make this a game. So what exactly does this mean for anything? Well, to me, it kind of sounds like he wants the three Holy Knights to see how many children they can each kidnap. You know, in classic Celestial Dragon fashion, a sick contest just for fun. And I'm pretty sure many of you instantly thought also back to God Valley and the twisted slave hunt, because the Celestial Dragon also considered that a game for their own enjoyment. And so let's actually take a look at some of the other pieces that are shockingly similar in both of these cases. And I bet you can already think of some right from the get-go, but first let's actually lay out all the major players here for a second, starting with the actual God Valley incident, where we had the Celestial Dragons, their Holy Knights, a group of hunted innocent civilians, and then of course the slaves. Then, as a big shock for the Celestial Dragons was that the notorious Rocks pirates crashed the party, then the Raja pirates arrived, and finally Garp and his marines immediately followed to join the fight as well. So this is our list of main players here, and of course we won't have an exact one-to-one identical situation here. I mean, it's not like Rocks himself is gonna just show up and roll up to Elbaph, right? So that would be pretty epic if that happened. I mean, you do know the rules in One Piece. If you don't see the body, you know, they're probably not dead. All right, but getting a little bit off track here. We were talking about the major pieces on the God Valley chessboard, and the final one that is really important to keep in mind is of course the legendary treasure that was offered as a reward for the hunt. So yeah, to summarize, we have all these stupidly powerful characters and a treasure that they're all competing for. And of course, it won't be the exact same characters showing up here in Elbaph, but it's a bit wild to think that there are actually two characters who were themselves at God Valley who are also here in Elbaph. And you may have forgotten about him already, but we do have to keep in mind that Kuma was a slave in God Valley. I mean, he hasn't done that much here in Elbaph, given that we don't really know if he's even alive, but just keep it in mind. And then the even bigger player we have to mention is of course Scopper Gaban. As my boy and one of the top dogs of the Roger crew, he was definitely a major part of the battle there, and most importantly, should know the secrets that I'm just dying to hear about what really happened. Like, what really happened to Rocks after the fight? How did the Raja pirates and marines defeat the strongest crew ever assembled? And of course, what exactly happened that led to God Valley being erased as a result of everything? Like, come on, Oda, these are all questions that I need answers to ASAP, and I'm really hoping that Scopper will provide some of them if we're getting a similar setup to what happened in God Valley and Elbaph. Like, maybe he can drop a God Valley flashback mini arc like we got in Egghead or something like that, though based on chapter 1140, it does seem like he's planning to sit out the battle, at least for now. Of course, that could change pretty quickly, since I figured that his son Colin is probably, let's be real, very likely going to be at the center of everything going on here with the Holy Knights, and so he's going to get dragged into all of this pretty quickly. Alright, but so far I've only pretty much talked to you about who was at God Valley, but really what matters a lot more, I think, is which characters are going to take their places here in Elbaph if this is actually a mirror match. Because obviously we do have the Holy Knight representation here, although I just have to admit again that I'm pretty disappointed that Shamrock is leaving. I mean, we won't get to see him interact with Luffy, which kind of sucks. Plus, was, I mean, he was the perfect replacement for Garling, so I do wonder if he'll either be forced to stay after all, or if he will come back later in the fight. Maybe after the other Holy Knights maybe have already been defeated, or who knows, maybe the big guy, the Figalin family, the Garling himself, might even show up to throw down in the giant battle as well once again, and you know, just relive that experience. Next up, of course, we have Luffy and the Straw Hats pretty obviously taking the place of the Roger Pirates here, and really their role should be pretty obvious to everyone. I mean, they're here to help protect innocent people, and possibly also win that legendary treasure in the process as well. We'll talk more about what that treasure could be in just a moment, but the people that the Straw Hats are clearly going to be protecting are the children of Elbaph. I mean, we do know this at this point because Shamrock basically spelled out their evil plan for gaining control of the giants, which is to kidnap their kids. I can actually also see the Straw Hats who are currently in the library being in danger as well potentially, so that's even more reason for the Straw Hats to actually start fighting the Holy Knights. So, that means so far we have the Celestial Dragons taken care of, the people they're hunting, and the replacement for the Roger Pirates. Are you getting convinced that this is gonna be another epic war right now? If not, then let me next drop this on you. In God Valley, we actually knew that multiple legendary devil fruits were offered up as a reward for that hunt. For example, we do know that Kaido's Azure Dragon Fruit and Kuma's Pawpaw Fruit were part of the rewards here, two of the all-time most OP devil fruits we've seen in the entire story. Now, on top of that, there might also have been a mysterious treasure that the world nobles had stolen from Pirate Island, and that could have been one of these 6 powerful devil fruits, or it could have been something completely different altogether. My personal favorite idea is that this might have been that mysterious egg that we've seen on Roger's ship in the past, and Roger took it from God Valley, but that is obviously not confirmed and just speculation. Just a cool idea, I think. So, to sum it up, the overall treasure of God Valley for sure includes insanely broken devil fruits and potentially another type of treasure as well. And what do you know? We have a very similar setup already right here in Elbaph with just a few interesting twists to this idea. Because in this case, the legendary devil fruit has supposedly already been eaten by the cursed prince himself, Loki. And I do say supposedly here because I'm still a little bit on the conspiracy hype train. I mean, it's still pretty much possible that Loki didn't even eat the fruit and has been pretending all this time. I mean, Loki's entire character is built on lying and trickery after all. But either way, whether he has eaten it or not, we have already seen that the Holy Knights are really interested in Loki's power. Like, very clearly, they do view him as a sort of treasure to acquire here for themselves in Elbaph. But if that is going to be the devil fruit, then you might be wondering what the other extra special treasure could be here. And while we don't actually know what actually got stolen from Pirate Island back before God Valley, I do think we can make a pretty clear guess on what the special treasure could be this time around. And I think obviously it's going to be a devil fruit that lets you plug your own Patreon in a video, because Patreon is where you become a real member of our pirate family and get access to bonus content that's not available anywhere else, access to all of our artwork in 4K and higher, early chapter reactions, and actually much more than just that. And meanwhile, your dollars help us make way better content for you, as every single cent goes back into making these videos. Because if you thought that I'm the one who is editing this video, or hand drawing the awesome thumbnail for it, or who's creating all of these other great art assets for the channel, sadly, I'm not quite that talented, and even if I were, it would probably still be impossible to do all of this myself. So I do have a team of insanely talented artists and editors that allow me to cover One Piece in so much depth for you and have a lot of fun with all these videos. So if you want to join the crew, check out Patreon with the link below. Okay, plug over. This extra special treasure we were talking about probably isn't cloud technology or anything like that, even though I do think that ancient technology could still play a pretty big role in this arc clearly, but rather I think it's most likely going to be the final road poneglyph that we've all been expecting to be a major fact in the conclusion of this arc. I mean, to me at least, that would definitely qualify as a special treasure. Now at this point, I still very much agree with the theory that Loki could be literally sitting in front of the road poneglyph, so now that Luffy has the key to Loki's chain, we could be seeing the road poneglyph potentially very soon. But with that being said, so far that is pretty much all the setup we have in order for God Valley 2.0 to actually happen. So at this point you might be wondering what and who we're still missing here. And well, the obvious thing we're still missing is, for one, the Rocks Pirates. I mean, there's just no getting around it. We just don't have a great comparison in Elbaph for them right now, but I mean, that of course doesn't mean that we're not gonna get it. And I mean, come on, there's just one option that is just so obvious for who could be going to fill his role here. It's of course Kobe. No, I'm just kidding. It's Blackbeard. Of course. I mean, who else would it be? Use this kid? Again, we haven't seen a body, so I'm not convinced he's dead quite yet, and maybe he'll go on a rampage after waking up washing on the shore, but yeah, useless Captain Kid? No, really, I don't think he's there. I think it has to be Blackbeard. Everything so far has been pointing in that direction. He's basically confirmed to have inherited Rox's will, his ship is even called the Saber of Zebek, and he took over Rox's old base on Pirate Island. Plus, if you believe some theories, he might even actually be a second coming of Rox himself, or Rox's pet dog, or even have Rox's own soul inside of his body. I mean, yeah, the Blackbeard theories have been getting pretty crazy these days, but without a doubt, I do believe that Blackbeard might be showing up here in Elbaph. There's just way too much in this arc that he could want to steal. The final road poneglyph, Loki's legendary devil fruit. I mean, it's Shanks's territory, kind of, so you know what I'm talking about. But there is one big problem with Blackbeard representing Rox, because as far as we can tell, Rox's personality seems to be a lot more like Luffy's, where he's just willing to jump right into a battle. But if we know anything about Blackbeard, it's that he almost never enters a straight up fight that he isn't 100% sure he can win straight out. May I remind you that he just swooped in at the end of Marineford when everyone was already wounded or injured or dead, and then just ran away from Shanks. He ran away from fighting Rayleigh and the Seraphim, and the one fight he did actually go all out in was against Law and his crew, which is clearly not exactly a fair matchup. So all of that is to say that there is no way that Blackbeard is the one who truly kicks off a God Valley 2.0, I think. I just can't see him starting a fight himself like that. So maybe instead of the Rox Pirate equivalent starting the chaos, I think it's much more likely that the Holy Knights and the Straw Hats will start a war this time, and then Blackbeard will come in at the end, like he always does, and try to sneak away with the prizes. And let's be real, doesn't that just sound like the most Blackbeard thing to do ever? Now, if we're talking about evil plans here though, there is one idea that has been in the back of my mind for almost over a year now, because we still don't know what's gonna happen to Garp. I mean, we kind of have to assume that he's still being held captive by the Blackbeard pirates, and it kind of seems like the Marines and the world government don't have the time or aren't all too interested in trying to free him. And they certainly don't seem interested in negotiating for Garp's release like Blackbeard was originally hoping. So it just kind of makes a lot of sense to me at this point that Blackbeard will bring Garp with him to Elbaph and potentially use Luffy's grandpa as some sort of bargaining chip. Now, if something like that were to happen, Garp could technically become the Marine representation we're still waiting for in Elbaph. However, I personally think that this is not very likely to happen. Let me explain why. Clearly, if Blackbeard is keeping Garp prisoner, he must have found some way to keep this absurdly powerful and broken person from escaping. Maybe Aokiji put him into a deep cryo freeze or something like that, because otherwise I just don't see how chains could keep this man prisoner ever. So if that is true, then Garp could be in no condition to fight, and there must be some other Marine group who might be coming to Elbaph instead. But luckily, there are a few really good options that we can discuss here, one of them being the most likely and one other being my personal favorite. So let's just assume for a moment that Blackbeard does come to Elbaph and maybe he brings Garp with him. Then the most logical choice for a Marine to come to Elbaph would of course be his favorite student, Kobe. Now, we all kind of know that Kobe's feeling some intense guilt about the fact that Garp sacrificed himself on Pirate Island, so it shouldn't really surprise anyone if Kobe shows up again with a squad of Marines to try join the fight in Elbaph. And I don't necessarily think that they would be trying to protect the Giants. Instead, I mean, they would probably be trying to save Garp, which already would be a really interesting contrast to the God Valley incident if you ask me, because that would mean that it is the pirates like Luffy who are fighting to protect the citizens, while the Marines this time might be kind of taking on the role of the Rox crew and just showing up to win back their own personal treasure. That would be a very interesting inversion going on here if this is how it turns out, but it could represent how the Marines are looking looking out for themselves, while the pirates are the ones truly trying to do the most good here for the people of Elbaph. And while Luffy fighting side by side with Kobe, mirroring Roger and Garp would be kind of nice, I'm not super excited about it, and there is another option for another Marine showing up in Elbaph, and this next one is gonna turn up the heat to about 1,000,000 degrees, literally, because I can also make a really good argument, I think, that the Fleet Admiral himself, Akainu, will finally make his move by coming to Elbaph as well. And I honestly don't have a ton of straight up evidence to support this besides two pretty straight up facts. First up, we just know that this man has been dying to do anything ever since he became Fleet Admiral. Literally every time we've been seeing this dude since the time skip, he's completely frustrated that he's basically become an administrator more so than a fighter. At this point, all he's doing basically is follow the Gorosei's order, so I could very easily see him deciding that a massive gathering of pirates would be a good excuse for him coming down to fight. Or maybe he could be chasing down Kuma as revenge for the former warlord thrashing Marijoa before he reached Egghead Island. However, the second reason I could very easily see Akainu come to Elbaph is that for a very long time, I've kind of been believing that the Adam Tree might actually be burning down. You know, the entire Ragnarok thing with the world burning and being born again, and the only character I can really see accomplishing a feat like that, at the moment at least, is Akainu and his beyond broken magma powers. I think at this point still known as the officially strongest offensive devil fruit in the story. Now, before we go any further here though, we do have to remember that back during God Valley, Garp teamed up with the pirates to defeat Rocks, but I honestly don't know what would happen with the Marines in this case. Would they fight with the Holy Knights? I mean, surely not, right? But does that mean that they would fight with Luffy against Blackbeard and the Holy Knights? I'm not 100% sure either. I mean, if it was Kobe, I could obviously easily see him join up with Luffy and being focused on saving Garp, and it's kind of tough to see Akainu joining up with pirates, although maybe he kind of forces himself to fight with Luffy just like Garp very probably had to fight alongside with Roger, even though we can assume he really did not want to at that point. Actually work out pretty well, because for a while now I've really liked the idea that Akainu might eventually turn away from the government anyways. I mean, we do know that he was merciless at Ohara and Marineford, but lately, ever since the time skip, we've kind of been seeing a very different side of him. I mean, just look at his conversation with Kizaru after Egghead Island. That was the first time ever we've ever seen Akainu show anything that comes close to remorse or sympathy or, you know, trying to be nice. So maybe there has been a good man in there all along, and he will finally come out once he realizes that absolute justice and the tyranny of the world government is not the right way to live. Maybe it took bureaucracy and doing paperwork and being commanded by the Gorosei for Akainu to finally realize that he might not be on the good team. I will say though, Akainu switching sides, very possible, but seems still a way off. So let's talk about the one other major difference that we have here in Elbaph compared to the situation on God Valley. Because originally, the Celestial Dragon's goal in God Valley was to exterminate the entire population of the island, plus a bunch of slaves just for their own enjoyment. And I don't know about you, but I personally kind of think that there must have been some other reason that this island was chosen specifically for this brutal tournament and then was eventually wiped off the entire map. Maybe as a punishment for refusing to join the world government or something like that, but that also means that the original goal in Elbaph is going to be way different from God Valley. Because so far at least it seems that in the Land of the Giants, the objective of the Holy Knights is to capture giant children and then hold them hostage so that they can actually gain control of the rest of the giants. So I'm not sure if this difference will cause any significant changes since we're still expecting an all-out brawl, but just something for you to keep an eye on and keep in mind, I think, going forward. But at this point in the video, assuming that everything happens, you probably are wondering the same thing that I am. How would this potentially world-shaking clash on Elbaph actually end? Because for God Valley, we actually do know that the Marines and Roger ended up teaming up to take out the quote-unquote bad guy, but do you really think that this will happen here as well? And if so, who will be the bad guy? Blackbeard or the Holy Knights? Just because we know that they're all scumbags who are threatening innocent people, children? And while I do have a lot of ideas and thoughts how this could go, but let's start with these three right here. Because before we can talk about anything else here, we do need to establish if we actually think that these three Holy Knights pose a real threat to the Giants and the Straw Hats, and I personally do believe at this point very much yes. I mean, it does seem like Oda is building them up to be some of the strongest fighters that the crew has faced so far, but it could also be that that's not the case, and at least I would hope so, because if they're actually that strong, then the world is going to be in some serious trouble. And this would of course mean that we have to assume that the Holy Knights don't have the same regenerative powers as the Gorosei, which, you know, I do believe they have, but it could be that they don't. But let's just assume for a moment that they don't have these powers. So if we don't think the three Holy Knights can win a fight, even though I do think they do, but let's say they don't, that still leaves us with a few interesting options. First, they could just not even fight at all and only sneak around to accomplish their task. Remember, at this point, their goal is to kidnap the children, not necessarily take out all of Elbaph by themselves, but I also can't imagine that they would get away with that without any trouble, so let's imagine that they end up in a fight. Again, assuming that they're not strong enough, then I do think one serious possibility is that they summon even more of the Holy Knights to help here. This does seem like the arc that Oda has chosen to showcase them, just like he showcased the Seraphim and Eket, so it does make sense to me that we will see most, if not potentially even all of the Holy Knights show up here in Elbaph. Which could of course lead to that massive war that Oda has talked about, and that would live up to the God Valley 2.0 hype as well. And this would also parallel with the burning of Ohara, where there was a massive tree that burned down and the world government tried to destroy all the ancient history that is now on Elbaph once again, kind of merging God Valley and the Ohara incident into one. But let's now get to the most important part of this all, which is how we think that battle would end. Now, of course, we already know that God Valley ended with Rocks being defeated, but honestly, I kind of think that things could be a little bit more complicated this time around, because Oda very rarely just straight up copies the exact same result for two different events that mirror themselves. Usually there is a major twist, so maybe this time around the Rocks figure wins. Yeah, I mean, I'm saying it's pretty much possible that whatever alliance we get between the Marines and Luffy may not even be strong enough to stop Blackbeard coming in and taking what he wants. That could mean he takes the Final Road Poneglyph, or kills Loki and steals his legendary Devil Fruit, or takes Robin. Whatever the case be, I think that if we get this whole second legendary battle here, then it will not go as well for the world government as it did last time. Because all of this now finally leads us to perhaps the biggest point of this entire conflict, and another reason why I think it's very likely to happen: Ragnarok. Revolution. The end of the world. Yes, this event could and should be the start of all of that, because if you look back at Rox's overall goal, he wanted to rule the world, at least according to Sengoku. So basically take down the world government and be king of the world, but he failed, of course, by losing at God Valley. This time though, I think that we will see the start of a true worldwide rebellion, and there's one part here that you might have been missing, because who is the one major faction that we haven't mentioned yet? Nope, it's not Cross Guild, although I mean, at this point, I could see them showing up as well. It's actually, of course, the Revolutionary Army, which fits in very nicely as a representation for the slaves that were on God Valley, including Kuma, Ivankov, and Ginny, who are all then later on members of the Revolutionary Army. And we do know that their goal is to take down the world nobles, and so I kind of fully expect them to either show up in Elbaph and contribute to the fight here, or make other plans against the world nobles while the Holy Knights are in Elbaph, as I talked about in my chapter review, potentially attacking Marijoa right now. Because don't forget, the leader of the Revolutionary Army, Dragon, specifically said that they would make their move once the Holy Knights were put into play, and well, the time is finally here, buddy, so time to finally put your money where your mouth is and join the fight. Could be why Shamrock has to go back, but honestly though, how sick would it be to finally see Dragon join the battle, even if it's just a last-minute rescue kind of thing like we got at the end of Loketown? I would take that, honestly, better than nothing. And hold on, I actually just had another idea, because we can't forget that God Valley supposedly disappeared from the world. Like, it's gone. Like, real gone. So I've always kind of wondered if Imu destroyed it with the ancient weapon, just like he did to the kingdom of Lulusia. So since we're getting a second version of God Valley, would Imu then do the same thing here on Elbaph? I mean, he does seem to want to get control over the giants, but if he couldn't get that, would he just wipe out the entire island instead? Because that would definitely be a scenario where the Straw Hats might need saving, and the perfect time for Daddy Dragon to swoop in and be a hero potentially. It's absolutely possible in my mind, but I do have to be honest, I'm still kind of getting over my disappointment that Shamrock might be going back to the Holy Land? Like, he should be the Garling equivalent here for God Valley 2.0, no? So why did Oda pull him back now? Well, I do wonder if it was possibly for some family drama, like say, maybe Shanks making a move somewhere else in the world. And man, I really can't wait to see these two guys clash at some point in the story. I mean, long lost brothers finally reuniting. What would they say? Would they really fight? And an even bigger question is this: what would have happened if they had actually grown up together as brothers? Like, would Shanks have become a Holy Knight? Because we did know he did go to Marijoa once at least. And if that had happened, would Shamrock have joined Shanks as a pirate? Well, if you want to know what would happen if Shanks had stayed in the Holy Land, you can watch that video right here. I think it's pretty fun and interesting, especially with everything we've learned recently. Otherwise though, thanks so much for watching, and a super special shout out once again to all the Patreon members on screen. You truly help make this channel amazing, and you can have your name there too. Check the link in the description. Alright, see you next time.